Welcome, everyone, to the Meidas Defense Weekly Update. I'm your host, Ken Harbaugh, joined by Terry Virts. Before we get into it, a quick update on where things stand. Trump was secretly pulled off Air Force One at the NATO summit in Turkey, smuggled onto a smaller jet by a catering truck after an Iranian threat. His own press pool was never told about. Terry, who we'll talk to in a second, in his Substack newsletter, called this a likely violation of the government's no double standard rules. Meanwhile, Russia hit Kyiv again this month with a barrage of ballistic missiles. And Zelensky says Ukraine is nearly out of Patriot interceptors to stop them. The imperative is clear. Ukraine has to be allowed to hit the launch sites inside Russia before those missiles ever leave the ground, including, if necessary, using F-16s, the same jet Terry flew in combat. Joining me, Terry Virts, retired Air Force colonel, F-16 combat pilot, NASA astronaut who commanded the International Space Station, ran for Congress in Texas, and now serves with the steady state. Terry, welcome to the show. Let's start with that cloak and dagger transfer from Air Force One to, I guess everything's Air Force One when the president's on it, but in a catering truck. I don't know if you've been following the memes about this, but I don't think it is quite the James Bond look that they were going for. It's been pretty savage with Trump huddled in the catering truck surrounded by cheeseburgers. But on a more serious note, what do you make of the fact that they left the press pool on the jet that was supposedly being targeted?
Well, I think something that we should never forget, Trump's a draft dodger. I mean, when the country
Yeah.
called him, he did everything he could to avoid joining the military. So that is the foundation of the man's character. So the fact that he would run from danger and let other people in danger. What's the quote from Lord Farquhar in Shrek? If we do this
It's a
thing, you might die,
sacrifice. Yeah,
but it's a sacrifice I'm happy to make that you die.
that's right.
That was my favorite quote about it. I mean, there's a part of me that was like, this is kind of cool, sneaking the president to avoid Iranian terrorists. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Except for to leave these press people and have them fly off as a sacrifice is not cool. And in fact, it violates the government's own rules. You mentioned the no double standard after Pan Am. For those who don't remember, in 1988, the Libyan terrorists blew up a Pan Am 747. It was awful. And our intelligence agencies knew about it, and the State Department was warning its own people, hey, don't fly on Pan Am, but they didn't tell the public that. And so they created regulations, I think laws. I'm not a lawyer. This is not investment advice, but we have a specific, at least ethical duty to warn, I think is what my CIA friend of mine calls it. So it's just, and there was ways to do it. You could have just flown him out of the country early, which they did on a different airplane, and then just come on board Air Force One and go, hey, sorry, press, this is going on, and just not told anybody, just gotten him out of the country. There were ways to do it without literally having them be potential sacrificial lambs. So,
And this feeds into this larger story about the corruption with the new Air Force One, which was not suitable to carry the president because it's such a security liability. I mean, none of this seems to be. I keep on marveling at their total incompetence when it comes to the information battle with Iran, with the messaging war, with the ability to communicate to the American people. They are so much worse this time around than they were in Trump 1.0. It's like the emperor has no clothes all of a sudden, and people realize it. And even this cloak and dagger operation, which I feel like in Trump 1.0 they would have been able to describe as, cool, is just an embarrassment.
yeah, that's exactly right. There's a couple adjectives that always apply: incompetent, immature, corrupt, and the bottom line is malevolent. That's kind of those are the job requirements for the top folks. There's good people who are working in government. I get that, but the leaders, guys like Pete Hegseth, Kristi Noem, the top guys. The disaster, Ken, that this Iran war is for America will be generational.
Yeah.
Like it has really hurt America generationally for lots of different. I was saying back in March that we're using up all of our missiles. There was just a report that obviously they've launched 3 times as many Patriots as Ukraine has used in their entire war. And now Ukraine doesn't have Patriots and they're getting killed every day. They used 80% of our THAAD missiles. And for those that don't know, THAAD is it's our biggest, best, $10 million ballistic missile interceptor. CNN is reporting that we've launched 80% of them, that's not good for South Korea, North Korea. That's not good for China, Taiwan. That's not good for America, So for many reasons, this is a disaster.
I want to double click on the missile gap and then we'll get
Right.
to Iran. I want to go back to the engineered incompetence of this administration, a theme we're constantly hitting here. But the missile shortage isn't just about a production bottleneck. Sure, these things are tough to make. Some of the production cycles for a tomahawk or a PAC-3, it's months to years from start to
Right.
finish in making one of these things. They're hard to make. But it's also just idiotic deployment of these weapon systems using a multi-million dollar missile to take down, for example, a $20,000 Shahed drone, and in some cases, multiple multi-million dollar missiles to down these cheap Iranian drones. And if you look at just the economic, the math of this equation, the Iranians don't even need to get a Shahed through. If they're soaking up millions to billions of dollars of ordnance with their cheap drones, they are winning the engagement. Can you talk about I don't know, maybe some insight into the mindset of the current DoD that is using missiles this profligately, as
Yeah.
opposed to the Ukrainians who have figured this out and who we refuse to learn from?
Yeah. Well, it's not only us launching them, it's our Gulf partners,
That's
Saudi,
right. Yeah.
UAE. And then they're not only shooting down Shaheds, they're shooting down American jets. Remember that Kuwaiti shot down 3
Right.
US Navy F-18s. I mean, so
Yeah.
yes, they're using them to shoot down things they shouldn't be using them for. So I hope we learn this lesson. It was interesting. There was just an exercise in Europe, and the Ukraine said, actually, we don't want to join it because you guys don't know what you're doing, because they've learned a lot. And I really hope that we can learn as things come on. Pete Hegseth doesn't strike me as a willing to listen and learn kind of guy. So
Yeah.
I hope the mid-level ranks in the military. I know lots of great people in the military. I'm sure they're going to try and learn. But I think a lot of folks know that we're running low on patriots, but it's a complete disaster because the Ukrainians are great at shooting down drones with ground systems. They're using old rockets, which are pretty cheap on their F-16s, and the rockets are laser guided, so they can shoot these things down with pretty cheap munitions. But the only thing that can take out a ballistic missile today is
Yeah.
certain versions of the Patriot, and they don't have any. They're going to start to get a trickle, and so it's not good to be undefended against air power. Like, that's going to be really bad for your country. So unless they can take out the missile production facilities and the launch facilities, it's not good. And this is the thing that I think very few Americans know. The North Koreans are re-engaging here. They're sending 30,000 troops. The Ukrainians were recently killed, I think last week, by North Korean missiles. So it's not just the Russian production sites. North Korea is attacking Europe. And it's like we're just standing around twiddling our thumbs. Trump is golfing with the air defense in the background. Did you see that? Those pictures of
Did.
him
I
with the
did.
strikers in the background. I'm glad he has time for golf. That's good. I know there's not much
Yeah.
going on. It's summer break for him. But North Korea is invading Europe.
Yeah.
And here we are. What are we doing about it?
Meidas did an edit of that golf photo with Trump at a mini golf course with the windmill on the other side. Of course, got in a little trouble because it was a joke. Like nobody assumed we were serious or Ron was serious, but MAGA can't take a joke. What
Thin
is
skin.
the
Thin skin.
very, very thin skin for the supposed alpha males in our politics? They sure do whine a lot. What is the holdup in Ukraine's ability to use its F-16s to reach those launch pads inside Russia to stop the missiles before they even take off. I meant to send you the Washington Post article that answers this question, but it's basically the flip of a switch. Why is Ukraine not capable of hitting the launchers themselves and having to engage on the terminal phase, which is the hardest way to shoot down a missile?
Yeah, the best way to shoot down an airplane is when it's on the ramp sitting there. You don't want to wait until you're in a dogfight with it. Same thing with
Yeah.
missiles. It's also a lot cheaper to do it that way. It really comes back. There's a lot of things that to ways to answer that question, but it comes back to Biden. I mean, Biden was very slow at getting Ukraine things they needed, like Patriots and F-16s. In fact,
Mhm.
America's never given them or sold them an F-16. The only F-16s they have are these old 1980s models from Europe that they were getting rid of anyway. So they were expecting Ukraine to fight the Russian army without a modern combat air force, and they got a few French Mirages. The best, I guess, suppliers they have are Sweden. They're going to sell them, modern Gripens, which are kind of like the F-16. But first of all, we should have built out a modern, 100, 150 F-16 equivalents, and they could do some real damage with that.
Yeah.
The other thing is you can't just fly an F-16 through Russian air defenses. Now, Russian air defenses are also being severely degraded just because
Yeah.
this war has gone on for so long. But you do need some standoff munitions, which we didn't build up. So America should be the arsenal democracy. We just never got things going back in 2022 like we should have. And certainly Trump has been 1,000 times worse than what we saw in Biden. So we never built up the systems that we need. And Ukraine said, all right, we'll build our own. And they have built amazing long range drones. We've all seen the pictures of the refineries up in smoke. Recently, they're going after wildberries, which is basically the or the Russian Amazon, because they sell components for missiles. So that's been
Yes.
successful. They need Starlink for terminal guidance. The Russians are really good at electronic warfare. They jam, there's no GPS. So they need to be able to use Starlink to precisely hit targets. And Elon has not allowed that to happen. And Trump could override that and say, let him use Starlink. So that's the new request that Zelensky just had. They have to have it, Ken, unless they can bomb these missile launch sites and storage sites, they're just defenseless. They're getting hit by these missiles every day. So that's a really important thing. Tomorrow, SpaceX could turn on the Starlink and they could start doing a lot better damage against these long range
Yeah.
missiles that Russia has.
What should Americans know about the Ukrainian fight and its relevance to us? If Ukraine falls, what's the next
Right.
uh, what happens next? I don't wanna say domino because of the
Yeah.
discredited domino theory of the '60s, but you have a revanchist Russia that has ambitions way beyond Ukraine that are stated. These are not sort of divined by the CIA. Putin has been overt in saying he wants to expand. They've actually tested NATO's defenses and its political resolve with incursions into the Baltics. They just launched a missile into Poland. There's a massive crater in a field in Poland from a ballistic. What are the stakes if Ukraine does not get the help it needs to fend off this invasion?
So I've always said from the beginning, if Ukraine wins, this is the last battle of World War III, and if Ukraine loses, this is the first battle of World War III. The Russian and the Chinese goal is to, end America's dominance. They want to end Pax Americana. They want to increase their standing and decrease ours. Like that's what's really at stake here is ending the American, uh, way of life around the world. Not way of life, but and they're being very successful at it. They have really undercut America's standing. So when I was running for Congress, I would tell folks a lot of people in my district join the military. A lot of families are sending their sons and daughters to join the military. Those kids are going into a much more dangerous world, a world where we don't have allies. The Trump administration has really profoundly damaged our ally network. and the likelihood of more wars happening, Russia continuing this, Putin wants to bring back the Russian Empire. China wants to take over Taiwan. The likelihood of more wars happening is only increasing. If we could help Ukraine win, kind of put that stake in the ground and go, no, this isn't going to happen. George H.W. Bush famously said, this aggression shall not stand, and we kicked Iraq out of Kuwait. If we did that with Ukraine, that would set us on a trajectory for a much safer and better world, and also cheaper world. Like this chaos where there's war and nuclear proliferation. I want to talk about that. It's going to cost us a lot of money for a defense in that world. If we had allies and alliances like NATO to keep the peace, it would be a lot cheaper for the American taxpayer. So it's just better for your life. But real quick on the nuclear thing, I know it's a long answer. I think the worst thing that is coming out of it, there's a lot of bad things coming out of Ukraine that kind of are America's diminishing role in the world. The nuclear proliferation is going to be an absolute disaster. The lesson from Ukraine is, if you have nuclear weapons, don't get rid of them like Ukraine did 30 years ago. And if you don't have nuclear weapons, get them. And they're, South Korea, Japan, Saudi Arabia, Poland. There's a lot of
Well, if you
getting
combine
them.
our failures in Ukraine and Iran, those two together make a powerful case for the latter. You're absolutely right. Our deal with Ukraine was, if you give up your nukes, we'll have your back.
Right.
We didn't meet that obligation. Our lesson to Iran is, if you had had a nuke, if you had broken out, this never would have happened. And every other country around the world is hearing that loud and clear. Add to that the lack of confidence in America's nuclear security umbrella.
Yeah.
And you have countries like France stepping up. Can you talk about the game theory involved here when you have not just a bipolar order breaking down, but I think we've got 7 nuclear reactors now. What if that grows to 12? The game theory calculation breaks down and it just becomes unpredictable, infinitely more dangerous when you have this many nuclear reactors.
That's exactly right. The Soviet Union US competition was not great, but at least they were rational actors, and you could count on a Soviet chairman was not going to destroy his country. He wasn't suicidal. Iran, it's funny to hear Trump talk about in Iran, well, they better not do this or we're going to bomb their power plants. Like, dude, they invented suicide bombing. Like, bomb their power plant. They don't care. The mullahs in charge there don't care. The theory of how the Trump administration is working only applies if you have a rational actor. And it's not like going from 2 to 3 nuclear competitors or 3 to 4. It's not plus, it's times, right? This is an exponential level of complexity. By the way, China is really China is a full-blown nuclear powerhouse right now. They have hundreds of missiles. I would expect that those Chinese missiles are probably going to work. A lot of the Russian missiles are old and they're not all, 100% mission capable. So this is not a bipolar nuclear world anymore. It's a tripolar nuclear world with a lot of other significant medium powers. So the complexity is something that certainly the Trump administration doesn't have the intellectual, not to mention moral, but they certainly don't have the intellectual horsepower to manage this. This is not the era of Henry Kissinger level diplomacy. So 100 years from now, Ken, when people look back on this era, they're not going to look back on it kindly for the disaster that we're creating.
I've had this conversation with Ruth Ben-Ghiat and others who study authoritarianism and the engineered incompetence that it requires. I mean, it's one thing to observe the Trump cabinet and their sycophancy and scratch your head and say, man, how did this collection, this menagerie of incompetence come together around one person, until you realize that it's a requirement to get close to President Trump. If the commander in chief is a clown, the people he assembles have to be a clown show. And if anyone is too competent or too capable, enough to make the president look bad, they are purged. And you see this throughout history. I mean, Mussolini being a well-studied example of, clownish but malevolent incompetence.
Right.
And I think you have to understand that about this administration, this president in particular, and his character, and this through line of autocracies that that thrive on incompetence, that really cannot tolerate somebody who is too good at their job.
I you nailed it. I mean, I think I've heard it put like this: A-level leaders hire A-level people, but B-level leaders hire C-level people because they're afraid that they're going to take their job, and that's what's happening. I don't know if I saw this just minutes before we came on. A tweet just came out that the latest corruption thing is they're going to dismantle this registry of beneficial ownership. So it's this big anti-corruption effort that the U.S. government did a few years ago to make a list of. It's basically anti-shell companies. So
Yeah.
if there's a shell company, you have to register who you really are owned by. It's a way to do anti-corruption, and they're just dismantling that. So it's just it feeds into that kind of the ethos of this agency. Lack of competence allows the Trump boys to make hundreds of millions of dollars when a competent and morally, person at the Securities and Exchange Commission would not allow that stuff to happen. Dismantling the system is a feature, not a bug.
I want to connect some dots here. We've talked about the missile shortage. We've talked about resurgent China and how much more dangerous the world is getting absent competent American leadership. How does the missile shortage register in terms of the global threats? How is Taiwan thinking about America's missile shortage in particular right now? How do those dots connect?
No, I think it's very important. I think China can see very well that America doesn't have the missiles that we need to defend, multiple theaters at the same time. Um, Although on the other side of that coin, it may be giving China pause. It's not necessarily easy to just invade somebody and take them over who don't want to be taken over. So on the one hand, America's not going to defend Taiwan in a significant way in the next few years. I've heard it's going to take us until 2030 at least to restock what we had before the Iran war. But on the other hand, China may be looking at this going, it's not that easy, blah, blah, blah. So there's two ways to look at it, but it's not easy to take over a country that doesn't want to be taken over. You can't just do it with long range missiles. One of the biggest problems with this administration, I think after that Strike Eagle got shot down and they had that big rescue operation, which was amazing. That was really cool. I think Trump got spooked and he doesn't want that to happen anymore. So we're just launching these multi-million-dollar Tomahawk and JASSM cruise missiles. You should be just flying the F-35 in and dropping a GPS guided bomb and, for one or two less zeros on the cost per bomb. You shouldn't just only use $1 million missiles to do a big operation like this. You should use those missiles to take out the air defenses, and then you go in and drop the regular bombs. But
Right.
that's not what we've done. And that leaves South Korea, that leaves Taiwan, that leaves Europe. But I have a lot of friends, I have family in the Baltics right now. You've traveled to Ukraine. Like Europe is at risk. And so that's another bad aspect of what we've been doing in Iran.
Got a political question for you, and then I want to end on a high note. But on the politics, give us your take on Texas. We have been teased by Texas before into thinking it's a swing state, and this might be the year, right? You fought a hard fought primary campaign there, but looking statewide, something's happening, isn't it?
I think Tallarico is going to win. I actually started my race in the Senate race last year because I looked at Texas and I went, this is winnable with this Trump disaster. The Trump disaster this time is going to be worse than it was when Trump won. And B, a candidate with my background might appeal across the state of Texas. But I think Tallarico is a great communicator. He's probably the best communicator in the Democratic Party. And the only thing that Republicans can come up with is he's a vegan or whatever. They're just saying this crazy stuff about him. So They can't run
Which
on
would
a
be fine
record.
if it's true, but it's not.
I know, but yeah, whatever. I'd rather have a vegan than Ken Paxton. So, but he's not. So it's just when all they can do is say these dumb things. There's the old legal adage: if you're a lawyer, like if you have the facts, argue the facts, and if you don't have the facts, argue the law, and if you don't have that, then just argue. So they're down to the last straw, and then they nominated Ken Paxton, which like is the dream for Democrat. He's the worst imaginable candidate. So I don't know. I hate to say I definitely can't promise we're going to win. I think Gina Hinojosa is a
Yeah.
great candidate as governor. I certainly hope that we win. Look, Texans have been very badly served by this single party system for over 30 years. You know, we're number one. We love big things down here in Texas. We're number one in uninsured medical folks who don't have medical insurance. So, you know, our school system is way towards the bottom. So hopefully we can have a change. And look, the world requires it. Like this president needs some checks and balances. Just the fact, you know, I switched to running in Congress. My district was ground zero for gerrymandering,
Hmm.
and Americans from both parts. Very few Americans actually love our democracy these days. The gerrymandering was, you know, an absolute disaster for America, and other countries look at us and they're like, "Why would we want to be like you?" You know,
Yeah.
like what's great about your democracy? So we got to get things straightened out. And if we don't start winning elections, we're not going to have elections. So it's time. It's time for Texas to flip blue.
Well, I'm hoping as we wrap this up that you can give us that global perspective in a way only an astronaut can. I mean, you have looked down on the Earth. I think you're the first astronaut we've had on Midas Defense, but you've had the chance to look down and see the whole Earth at once. Does that shift your perspective?
Oh, absolutely, it does. So I came away from my space flights with a few different thoughts. Number one is we have planet A, there's no planet B. So like we got to take care of Earth. We're not going to all move to Mars or the moon or whatever. We'll send astronauts there, which is cool, but we're not all going there. So we have planet A, there's no planet B. And the other one, I remember I had this one night, it was my fifth night in space. We were flying over the Mediterranean. I could see like Israel and Jordan and Syria. They were all right there. And I remember thinking, guys, what's the problem? Why are we killing each other? We're all on this planet. Um, when in our science fiction movies, when the aliens come, we all humans have to get together and defend ourselves. So it's time to do that. And the way to do that, I think, is through democracy. I really believe in
Mhm.
America. I believe in our way of life and the democratic experiment. It is under assault globally. A friend of mine, a lady named Cheng Lei, was imprisoned by the Chinese a few years ago. She's Australian citizen. It was political retribution, and she got out of jail. She's a TV presenter right now in Australia. And I was talking about this, and they're like, "Yeah, China's goal is they love Trump. Their goal is just to undermine America because they want that authoritarian surveillance state, one party rule. Like
Yeah.
that's one future we have, but let's choose the democratic path. It's a much better future for humanity. So I'm optimistic we can do that, but we need a course correction. So it's time for that course correction to happen, I think.
Indeed. Thanks, Terry. We'll have you back soon. This is a lot of fun. Appreciate it.
This is awesome. Thanks for having me on. And Slava
Thanks.
Ukraini.
Slava, Slava. See ya.